Okay, well, we'd like to thank everyone to another class from the BYU Library Family History Center. Today we're going to be talking about exploring the old and the new family search genealogies. There's not enough that I can say about this, and an hour isn't going to be sufficient for me to actually explore this with any kind of the depth that it actually needs. The genealogies section of the Family Tree website has a lot of the most valuable records that exist. It's easily overlooked. So let's get kind of into it. And I'm going to have to say that it is the least known and least used of all the FamilySearch.org features. It's very frequently that I find when I talk to people about the website that I say, well, why haven't you looked in the genealogies section? And they go, I don't even know what that is. And so it's just something that's kind of uniformly skipped. And when you click on it, it seems to be kind of, well, I don't really understand what this is. And so you don't get into it. The genealogies is focused more on family trees than it is on individual records. And there's some concepts out there that when you have a family tree, that it's per se user generated and not reliable. But that is not necessarily the case, because many family trees are very well sourced and extremely reliable. And so we're going to kind of look at this in kind of a critical way, because there are parts of it that are basically not yet of any use at all, basically, to find anything that's new. And on the other hand, there's other things. The first thing you're going to be confronted in the first little pop-up that comes up when you open the genealogies section of Family Search, you'll see it up there on the menu up there. It says Records, Images, Family Tree, Genealogies. And when you click, there's a drop-down menu and Genealogies appears, or you click on this menu and it'll also appear. So this is a general search part of this little box with the enter a surname, place, village, or clan. And that's it. It's a general search of all the files on the genealogies section of the website. So if you want to begin to explore the website, you can just start by putting in a name of some place, or a surname, or a place, or a village, or a clan, literally, and see if it comes up and see what information is available. And the other part of it is that there's a lot of divisions. So the way that it's set up when it opens is there's a list of the different sections of the genealogies part of the website. And you click on the right or left-hand buttons to move through what's on there. But if you look at all of them, this is what's on that bar that you can flick through and see all of these different sections. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to work through each one of these and explain what it is, what value it has, and they're all in that genealogies section. So you don't have to go searching around on Family Search to find these. They're all there. Just have to click through and look at them. And I will also rank them. And as we go through, you'll see that Family Search has already told you something about the accuracy of some of these records. There's no way of knowing how accurate they are, which does not mean they're not useful or that they aren't accurate. So a fact that it says unknown data accuracy does not mean it is not accurate. It just means that there's no way for anyone to tell the accuracy from that record, because the information either is not sourced properly or it is user generated, which means it's not technically a source. Now, when we say user generated, what I mean by that is when you enter information as a user of the FamilySearch.org website, and you enter your information in the family tree, that's user submitted information. If you add a source to that, then that validates your user submitted information. what happens in most of the vast number of family trees out there, in the probably approaching billions of family trees on various websites out there, is that there are significant numbers that have no source information and cannot be verified. And the only way to verify, of course, an unsourced entry is to redo the research completely. So it's valueless. And as I've said many times, it basically is fantasy, because entering information without a source is simply doesn't help or doesn't build any usable information. Okay, so let's get into the first set. I would also have to kind of make this comment about it, is that Genealogies, it is probably part of the website that changes most frequently. The reason being is that these are evolving types of things that work through and will continue to evolve. And I can assure you from things that have been told me at various times by FamilySearch that there are more things that are coming. And so it's very obviously going to happen that basically are going to be here in the next months or year or so. And the technology, by the way, the technology is changing rapidly. And so that as the technology changes, there will be even more things added to this, as you'll see. So we're going to start with some basic, when I call these historical records, they're historical in the sense of FamilySearch historical. And that means that these records have been around for a very, very long time. When I say that, I mean into the more than 100 years of contributions. And I'll explain each of these separately. Okay, so the pedigree resource file, the PRF, this is all are acronyms for all of these, by the way, is a growing collection of GEDCOM files. Well, okay, so many years ago, more than 15, probably around the 15 or 16 years ago, FamilySearch, when PAF was a program, personal ancestral file, they offered to allow people to upload a GEDCOM file. That's a genealogical data communications file, which is a way of transferring information from one program to another. Now there's GEDCOM still current. It's still available on many of the websites. It's a way of transferring information from Ancestry or from MyHeritage or whatever, and from a variety of other programs. And now the latest version of GEDCOM is 7.0. And so it's still being involved, it's still being used, and it's still being developed. And we're currently on the GEDCOM steering committee and have been for years, and we are continue to develop GEDCOM. So, but the pedigree resource file, the reason why that was very attractive is back then, everything we had was on floppy disks. Recognize what those are. And sometimes it took more than one or even more than a few floppy disks to hold a complete file. And so the concept that you could upload your GEDCOM file to FamilySearch, who would then preserve it in its native format, would mean that you had a backup of all your data that was not on your floppy disk, which were terribly unreliable. And so this was very attractive. And back then, that time period, I uploaded 2 copies of my entire database as it existed at the time that I'd been entering it. And that just became part of this pedigree resource file. So then what happened? What happened is that FamilySearch went ahead and developed an online family tree program that they called new.familysearch.org, and I won't go into that in any detail. And that eventually it did not become, but a new program was developed called FamilySearch Family Tree. So what we have today is the FamilySearch Family Tree. Now, here's the interesting part. In the genealogy section of the FamilySearch.org website, all of those pedigree resource files that were uploaded, the GEDCOMs that were uploaded to the pedigree resource file, are in existence. They're all sitting there on the FamilySearch.org website. So it's like this archive of all of the information that people have been submitting for many, many years now. And so it's a huge amount of information. That's the good news. The good news is they're still in GEDCOM format, but they can be viewed on the FamilySearch website and searched. So it's a vast amount of information. Now, this is the as I always looked at it, the bad news. The bad news is that all of this information, or a substantial portion, not all of the pedigree resource file, but a substantial portion of the pedigree resource file was used to seed the new.familysearch.org website originally. And that information went into the database that went into create the FamilySearch family tree. Now, what results of that was that you can imagine how many different files. If I had two files that had copies of my information, all of copies of my information, and everybody else, that there were literally millions of duplicates. Yeah, that was the case. That exactly was the case. And a lot of those duplicates, as you'll find out, are still lurking around in the FamilySearch family tree. So if you see something that says, by the way, this will apply to all three of these, to the ancestral file and the IGI, that if it says on your entry, sometimes you'll run across entries on the FamilySearch family tree, and you'll go to a source and it'll say, the source was uploaded by FamilySearch, and it'll say they're on FamilySearch. Well, if that's the case, then what's likely there is information that was in one of these three files. And kind of to give you a preview, the ancestral file and the IGI also were three of the five files that went into the original creation of the FamilySearch family tree. So there was a tremendous amount of duplication of effort, lots and lots and lots of duplicate entries, millions. And there was a lot of information that had absolutely no substantiation, these unsourced information completely. Okay. So that was the pedigree resource file. It still exists and it's all there. And you can still, by the way, upload your file to the pedigree resource file if you wish to do so. I'm not encouraging that. There's other ways to back up your file now besides using that, and are more efficient. Okay, the next one in the loop is the ancestral file. And the ancestral file is a straightforward file. This one is even older than the pedigree resource file. This one goes back over 100 years. And what this is a digitization of all of the information that was submitted to FamilySearch and the predecessor Genealogical Society of Utah back to 1894. And so the ancestral file is family group records and pedigree files that were submitted clear back to that time period. Now, before you get anxious to say, wow, that must be good information, the answer is, and I'm going to say this in every single time, all of this information is already in the FamilySearch family tree. So there is absolutely nothing here. You're not going to find anything here. Now, there are some reasons occasionally to go back and see what were in the original entries that people put into the FamilySearch family tree to see if it was clear back 100 years ago that people had this information. But that's really this is just a place where they park this. And that's just how useful it is. It's only useful because if you have some specific reason to go back and look and see what your ancestors put into the tree. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one is the International Genealogical Index, or IGI. This is a compilation of records that were extracted, called extracted records. Well, they had volunteers who and they're still doing this today. This is, if you are unaware, there are extraction programs going on. And extraction programs simply go through the records in a geographical area or a time period or whatever, and they take all of the information from those records and they enter it into forms that have been created. Most of the IGI records occurred back in the 1960s, 70s time frame. And they focused him primarily in two areas, although there were other records that were entered and extracted besides that, of English birth, marriage, and death records, and some records from Mexico. So then what happened here with the IGI is that when the records were extracted, they extracted, for instance, let's say happens in what happened in England. They extracted an individual as a birth record. Then they extracted the individuals from their, these would not be birth records, they would be christening records, excuse me. And then they would be a marriage record. And then there would be a burial record, which was the Church of England's 3 records. So at the minimum, and if they extracted the parents, they may have had the children on the parents, and then they extracted each of the parents. Anyway, so basically what was happening was that at a minimum, there were 3 or more records for every individual. And so if you've ever done English research, this will explain what happened. That's why you find duplicate records, 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to a dozen or more records for each family that you find in the FamilySearch family tree that happen to be connected to this IGI record that was uploaded. Okay, so this is the fine records. So look up at the top here at these accuracy statements. And I mentioned that earlier. The accuracy of the data is not known. That does not mean that it's totally not useful. It just means that it's not known. But from the standpoint of its usefulness for these 3 files, from the standpoint of the FamilySearch family tree, it's very unlikely there will be no information in the IGI or the ancestral file that isn't already in the tree. And for the pedigree resource file, there's possibility that there may be more. That's it. So just remember that substantially all the information in these trees are already there. This is not a place to go to do any kind of original research. And in addition to that, because they're either extracted or basically user submitted, the accuracy is not discernible. Okay, so if you'd like to look at it, you're looking at the FamilySearch Research Wiki. And if you go into the wiki and look for the pedigree resource file, you'll find this is an extensive explanation of how it worked and when it was used and what's there. And according to this, and as it says at the extreme bottom of my screen, has about 220 million records, but it's also being added to. So that's probably not completely accurate. And there's another one in the research wiki, and this is a screenshot of the research wiki, talking about the ancestral file. And this one has about 40 million people in the ancestral file with pedigrees and all of the information. And then there's the IGI, and that one has another huge number of information. Okay, so this is where you can go to find more extensive explanations of those 3 files that are in their entirety are in the genealogies section of the FamilySearch.org website. Okay, so now we're going to turn a page. And if you look up at the top of this one, where it says community trees, you'll see it says high data accuracy. And I'm going to say extraordinarily high data accuracy. These are also user created in a sense, but these are professional level genealogies for specific time periods or geographic locations. And if you look at the list here of places, you'll see that, for example, here, Welsh medieval database, primarily nobility and gentry lines, data range 100 to the 1900s. And there's 350,000 individuals. These have been exhaustively researched. But these are collections of records that are basically meaning that if they push the meaning of the term exhaustive, meaning they take in every record that exists in this particular subject heading, time period, or location. So if you're looking here and in that date range, you will find every record that exists. So this is tremendously valuable, but it's tremendously limited because there's only 263 of these collections. Some of these collections are tremendously large, but you want to do some searching in here, because I kind of hesitate to mention any specific records because it may not be here. There was a record at one time of all the European royalty. Just for your information's sake, every record that's possible to be searched for European royalty back to the zero, whenever there's records available, has been searched and is available already. There is no original research, very little. Let's say there's a small amount for extremely expert people in the medieval languages and whatever to find. But currently, the records of the people who lived during the medieval range up to 1500 are all completely been identified for years. So there's just nothing out there. I'm going to use the term loosely. I'm going to say there's almost nothing out there because there's so much has been done. But I kind of have to hedge because years ago when I was in Mesa, Arizona, I ran into a researcher who was doing early research, and was finding new records that hadn't been found. But that's very, very unusual. But you'll find these small databases in the date range are extremely valuable. And just as kind of a note here, one of the areas that they're most valuable is Norway. A lot of the villages and parishes in Norway have been completely researched. And by the way, those are called the community trees, and they're searchable. And here's the way to search them. There's also a way to search all the genealogies selections, because when you go to the search engine for these, there's a pull-down menu that lets you look at any one of the collections that you want to look at. So here's a way to drop down and see for the others. Now, from the standpoint of someone living in the United States, if you have African American or ancestors who came from Oceania, which is the Pacific Ocean area, this is a gold mine. Interestingly, gold mine. If you look over there, you'll see that there are 1.3 million transcribed oral genealogies here. And they have audio files for every one of the genealogies. And they create a family tree from the contents of those genealogy files. So far from telling people that there's no way to search your ancestors in Africa or wherever you want to call it, or down into the South Pacific. No, there's this 1.3 and growing very rapidly collection of oral genealogies. Now, the person count in each one is not great, but the combined total of all these oral genealogies, oral histories, is fabulous. And you may want to find out what's here just for your own information of researching through here to see what possibly you could get going. So here's a printout from a Tongan genealogy of showing the oral genealogy that was collected and put in here. Now, obviously, you're going to have to know quite a bit more about how the process went along and the information that's here, and do some of your own research before you get involved in this, because it's different to do genealogy through on oral genealogies. Now we come to one that a section that takes some explanation. A number of years ago, well, now it's been almost 50 years or more, many people throughout many programming computer people throughout the world were attempting to do what we call handwriting recognition. You know, when you get back into records starting with the end of about 1900, before 1900, there may be parts of the records that are printed, but on the other hand, most of the records are in handwriting. And it can be very challenging to read some of the handwriting. Well, over those years, those many years, as people worked on the project of doing handwriting recognition, the handwriting recognition was the kind of the wished for goal from all of the researchers. And so a significant amount of resources were put into the process of developing handwriting recognition. One of the forefront of handwriting recognition was the BYU Family History Technology Lab. And there's other organizations, and FamilySearch up in Salt Lake was also working on it. And the question was, there's basically a number of challenges, and give a good hour or two on handwriting recognition. But what happened over that time period was the process became more and more doable. There were two or more factors that created the ability to do handwriting recognition. First of all, it took more computer power and higher levels of memory storage than anything was available just a few years ago. So it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years that computers became powerful enough. And we're not talking about desktop computers here. We're talking about the giant computers that are available to FamilySearch and other huge businesses, what they call supercomputers. Well, if they have the level of those supercomputers, eventually the speed of the computer, the ability of the programs, and everything kind of came together about 2 or 3 years ago. And at that point, most of the handwriting recognition exceeded an expert paleography, the study of old handwriting, significantly. So the computer could not all of a sudden, but evolutionary way, had surpassed almost all the experts who existed. So therefore, it was converted from a theoretical process into a practical issue. And then there were a number of practical issues that had to be solved. The biggest of those issues was identifying where the information that you wanted to extract was located on the page. Well, part of that was solved by digitizing and transcribing everything on the page, not worrying about where it was or what information was there. And that began to be very useful. And when the 1950 U.S. Census was done, Ancestry.com used handwriting recognition and the character recognition programs of the OCR programs, the optical character recognition for the text, to basically go through and do an index of the census in about 6 hours. So it was just an amazing process. And now FamilySearch is involved in doing handwriting recognition at an accelerated rate, focusing primarily on Latin American countries and Spanish language records and some US records. And so these are the ones that are being indexed, or you might say completely transcribed, at a tremendous rate, millions and millions of records a week. are being transcribed. So what we've got is a process here that will, over the next few years, 2 or 3 years actually, will begin to make tremendously larger amounts of information available to be searched directly by the computers. So this is amazing breakthrough. Now, one of the things that's possible to do once that information has been extracted from, let's say, records like the ones down here, the census tree, 120 million people, 122 million people on this, searched in this. And what do? Well, we create a program that can create family trees from those records for every person that appears. Okay, so the question then comes up almost immediately, what's left for researchers to do? And the answer is, well, a lot. So here, for example, is a page of the transcribed page from the census records. And it's actually some records from the census. And what this did is give you information. So I have my grandfather up there on the top line, Leroy Tanner. And this is the family tree that was extracted. Now, it's a limited amount of information. The example here is that this information is completely sourced. In other words, they're telling you where you got the information. All those numbers down there give you where that information came from the U.S. Census Project. So here's a computer-generated tree. Now, there's still some discussion out there as to whether or not this will be used in the future, if this is actually the future of genealogy, that the computers are going to create family trees for everybody. Even if that were possible, is it advisable? Is it going to be accurate enough? Do we really have the confidence in the trees and the computer programs that they can do that correctly? Well, okay, so there's a considerable number of us, for example, that are working on artificial intelligence right now and are involved in it, say in this case, a national basis. And one of the things that we are considering in that examination of the use and the applicability of artificial intelligence to genealogy is whether or not it can be used accurately for research. Is there something you can rely on when you do research with the AI program? Well, my personal experience working in this for many years, but in the last year and a half, focusing specifically on the new programs that are coming out almost weekly, is that so far they don't do anything that's worth the time it takes to talk to them. They do not have access to, yet through the handwriting recognition and otherwise, they just don't have access to the records, so they can't do original research. And so that's just the answer. The answer is, whether you like it or not, they can give you a summary of what's done on FamilySearch, for example, or they could tell you what is out there on the internet, but they can't go into the records that haven't been transcribed, indexed, and even indexing doesn't help. If they haven't been transcribed and using handwriting recognition and optical character recognition, then the computer doesn't have access to them. And so that's where we are right now. It's sort of a standoff, waiting for the technologies from the genealogy era to take over. So I wouldn't really worry about that too much. The next one, and we're going across those little things, remember, that are showing up across in the genealogies section. And this one's called the Guild of One Name Studies. Now, this is not something new. The Guild has been around for a very long time. And it's located in Great Britain, and it is focused primarily in Great Britain. It is an interesting project. Basically, the idea here is to focus on individual surnames. So not looking at them from the standpoint of whether this Tanner is related to some other Tanner, or your name is related to some other person of the same surname. As you can assume, if you have a common surname like Tanner or Smith or Jones or Brown or Miller, or any one of these very, very common English surnames, that there's going to be a lot of people with that surname who aren't necessarily related, because all those kinds of surnames. But there are lots of surnames that are semi, I would guess to say, unique. In other words, they show very geographical areas. They show up in specific towns, and there is some very, very useful genealogical information that can be derived from doing these studies. And so basically what we have, this guild, the Guild of One Name Studies. So they have a couple of thousand members. They've done a couple of thousand, and they've done about 7,000 plus surnames. And the information of the database for this is on the communities. So, I mean, if you're looking and researching England or the United States, why not look here? Maybe you'll find out some information. It's impossible to predetermine, pre-guess what you're looking for individually, because everybody has a different family and everybody has different interests and the things that they're looking for. But this is another source, and it's here, and it's free, and it's on FamilySearch. So why aren't you know about it? Well, so for example, here's one of the names, Featherstone. And this has a website and tells about the name and all the places and everything about it and where it came from. And what you're going to find in English research is that names become very important, even though they may have a whole bunch of different variations. And that's why this is very important. So if you look at this, this is a researcher. This one researcher here has 66,000 people and 20,000 families and 3,185 sources and a lot of notes. So here's another avenue of research that's available. Okay, so one other thing that my FamilySearch has done, which is quite interesting, and that is by focusing on family trees in this particular, meaning pedigrees, in this particular section of FamilySearch, that kind of enables them to accumulate and store information from some of the other family tree programs. So some of the family tree programs that have a considerable number of people, and this is, in a sense, a way to back up their data, and and allow it to be freely accessed. Now, some of the commercial, of course, the commercial genealogical companies are not likely to end up doing this, but there are some who have considerable amount of user contributed information with unknown data accuracy that are available here. If you look at the person count over here in my one example in my screenshot, you'll see that there's some very, very small trees, but there's one here that's like 40,000 people. I mean, if you looked at this and you looked at the information that's there, you could tell pretty quickly whether or not it was just collected like you would collect, shells off the beach, or if it's something that has some sources and some substance to it. But that's why it's unknown data accuracy. But you never know where you're going to find information and get some key information that may help you with your research. So this is the mytrees.com website. You can basically get into the mytrees.com website and find additional records and information. That this is not, the website is not on FamilySearch.org. This is where that information that's stored there, those family trees that are in a sense backed up on FamilySearch come originally. The next one is called Roots Finder. It's exactly the same situation. It's a collection of free family trees, and basically it's apparently related to Find My Past in some way. And so it's information that is now available to be searched after the Genealogies section of the FamilySearch.org website. And you can see here there's once again a vast difference in the number of people in each of the family trees. And it looks to me from the partial list that I got in my screenshot that it could be in Eastern European languages and apparently in Chinese and some other types of languages. So there's a considerable amount of information out there. Now, this is more family trees, only these family trees are about 8,000 of them, and these are from American Ancestors. And American Ancestors has a paid portion of their paid website that will let people put a family tree. And obviously they've agreed to park some of those trees over here, or maybe all of them on FamilySearch. What's the good thing about the American Ancestors is that they focus on New England primarily. And so the people who are going to have family trees here on American Ancestors are going to be people who have English, New England, and more likely than that, more likely English and Great British ancestors, or anyone who, of course, primarily came to the New England portion of the United States. So here we have another set of trees. As with all the user submitted items, the data accuracy is unknown, which means that you need to look at the tree, find out if it's been sourced properly, and see if the information is helpful or believable. But right here, we have a way to search those trees. So this is kind of information that you may want to check into. If someone were asking me about if there's some priority here, there's lots of different avenues here. When would you be going into this kind of information normally? Well, some of these are now getting to the point where they may be your first level of research. On other cases, these may be sort of last-ditch attempts to see if there's anything I can find that I haven't looked at already, kind of places. But in this case, it's basically going to be more serious and in some kinds more professional genealogists who are working with American Ancestors than be working with some of the other more popular family tree programs. So here's the American Ancestors website is the website from the New England Historic Genealogical Society. It's the oldest genealogical society in the United States. And they have a fabulous amount of records for all of New England primarily. A very valuable site if you're doing active research and worth the subscription. It is a FamilySearch partner, but the access to the entire website is still behind their subscription service. So you need to have the full subscription if you're actually going to do serious research using this website. Now we have a newcomer. This company showed up about a year ago at RootsTech, and it's also has a family tree program. You can see from their sample selection that there's a lot of different languages in the entries, and the person count doesn't seem to be very high. This is a kind of wait and see. There's still information here that may have been attracted from someone who has not put any information into FamilySearch, and I would kind of emphasize that. We have a tendency to focus on one or two programs, and we think that we have all of the information that we need. And the answer is no, we don't. And you never know when a new people coming in will have information that you don't have. So that's kind of the window that all of these programs here bring to the table, and the fact that there is a lot of information here. This is the storied website. So if you're interested, you can explore this. It is a paid website. We call it a paywall website, meaning you can get into it. You can get into some free features, but then you have to pay to use the entire website. This is one you probably don't expect, and this is growing, but I don't know that you would, this is even not an area where I have even done anything, and that is in Middle East and in the Islamic world. And so there's some records here, not a lot, but this is kind of the beginning, I think, of some records. You'll see these have all been updated in the last few months, so they haven't even been on here for very long. That's why I emphasize that all of this is kind of changing rapidly. Now, what I would like at this point to caution everybody that almost all these collections are user contributed. So they need to be reviewed, and don't add this information automatically into the FamilySearch family tree without collecting and verifying the sources that exist. It's really important that you do that. There's so much out there on the FamilySearch family tree that needs to be sourced and needs to be clarified. And of course, there's always the issues with change and making changes and things like that. But there are ways and there are things, and I would watch the genealogy section because there are things coming that are probably going to be a significant impact on genealogy in the future. So, thanks for watching. And I think we have a few questions here, so I'd like to get through the questions. Comment about where the names come for that have no sources. Well, technically, if I were to sit down and begin my own genealogy, for example, so my own family tree, I could add my name and maybe my names of my siblings and my parents and my grandparents and maybe back a couple of generations. The point there when you do that is that you should say that this was put in by memory. That gives everybody the notice that the information needs to be verified in other ways. But that doesn't mean you can't put the information in there. Where it is unacceptable is where people add information to the family tree with no source that obviously needs a source, where you're disagreeing with information that's already in the family tree, whether sourced or not. And in the situation, that would be impossible for the individuals to have known that information firsthand from their own memories. So that's kind of the limitation. So it's valueless without having a source. That's just the whole problem. Let's see, I'm reading the next one. None of the sources are index collections, and it takes longer to create. Yeah, that's very true, and I think I addressed that a little bit in the discussion in my class today about the fact that full text searches and are going to replace the issue of index collections. So when you can search the entire text, there's no need for an index. You just search the entire document, every word for word, by the computer. The Mayflower's genealogies are in the genealogies section. They're in the communities, and the pedigrees and the silver books are there. And it's interesting that there's so much going on with changes among the Mayflower genealogies when there's absolutely no support for changing any of the information that is outside of what they do call the silver books. That's something you should know about.